I am announcing today that the United States will withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. In a few moments, I will sign a presidential memorandum to begin reinstating U.S. nuclear sanctions on the Iranian regime. We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction. Any nation that helps Iran in its quest for nuclear weapons could also be strongly sanctioned by the United States.
Well, let's go now to New York, where our correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease joins us there. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Obviously, Sherwin, much speculation for the past couple of months now that this was coming.
Well, in the president's words, Griselda, when I make a promise, I keep those promises. And then he immediately started making references to their efforts of a détente with North Korea. But very much the issue, as you well point out in that clip, is that President Trump has, as promised, pulled the United States out of the JCPOA. And that will inevitably cause some friction with allies, particularly European allies, who have been very swift in their response, in their reaction to the president's announcement in Washington that they will remain party to this joint plan of action as it relates to the curtailing of Iran's nuclear weapons. And we've also seen a response immediately from Tehran, Iran's President Hassan Rouhani, which referred to President Trump as a nuisance and said it was a good thing that this nuisance, quoting, of course, the Iranian president there, had left the JCPOA, but that they will continue to work with their European allies. And so we're seeing sort of a symbiotic relationship between Iran and those EU allies, many of whom have companies that have already invested in Iran after the lifting of those sanctions post the agreement in 2015. So lots of dynamics here. Of course, the big question now is as well, what happens now? What is the plan B if relations between the United States and Iran sour even further?
Well, just to quote from what he said there, Sherwin, he said, "It's clear to me that we cannot prevent an Iranian nuclear bomb under the decaying and rotten structure of the current agreement." Has there been any reaction at this point from the allies of the United States to the decision by President Trump?
That really is the operative paragraph in terms of President Trump's statement, Griselda, and I think it does require a little more deeper introspection. I mean, essentially he's saying that the JCPOA was not preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. The allies, you asked me for a reaction from the allies. The allies of the United States in this agreement say the very opposite thing. Yeah. The Deputy Permanent Representative of Russia just walked into the Security Council a short time ago, and he said they're very disappointed. They're very disappointed. We expect to hear the same sort of rhetoric from Beijing. We've heard from Federica Mogherini, the EU foreign policy chief, that said this is an agreement that is working and that Iran has been in full compliance with its obligations in terms of that agreement. So when the president makes a statement that says this is not preventing Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons, many people party to that agreement would disagree with that point of view. Many of those members of Congress in the United States. We heard from the number 3 Democrat in the Senate, Dick Durbin of Illinois. He said it was a mistake of historic proportions. We saw Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, tweet shortly ago, France, Germany and the UK regrets the US decision to leave the JCPOA. The nuclear non-proliferation regime is now at stake. So that's been the reaction here. We're waiting for the spokesperson of the Secretary General here at the United Nations. Yeah. In fact, I'm looking at my monitor. He's speaking right now. We'll hear from the United Nations Secretary General in terms of his reaction to this announcement by President Trump.
Well, Sherwin, those sentiments that were shared about Iran actually adhering to the deal itself is not only coming from outside. You've had the Secretary of State as well as the Director of National Intelligence as well that have also said that Iran has been adhering to some of those commitments under the deal. How's this all likely to unfold over the next couple of days?
Well, there is, Griselda, as you well know, a new leadership that is surrounding President Trump. Remember, he's gotten rid of people like Rex Tillerson, who were one of the people within the administration that were arguing very strongly for the United States to remain in the deal. His former national security advisor has also been ousted. So he's now got John Bolton, who is a very, what you call a conservative hawk in the United States, who once made a quote about, to deal with Iran, you need to bomb Iran. So these are the people the president has now surrounded himself with. So he's got different people in his ear, different to what he had previously in this administration, and I think that is playing out on your television screens today.
All right. What are we expecting to hear, I guess, in the next few moments from the UN Secretary General? Probably some interesting words, I guess.
Well, what the SG has been very consistent in saying is when this deal was accomplished, Griselda, in 2015, broadly welcoming the deal, thought this was a wonderful return to the international community to really what is regarded as the prowess of multilateralism around the world. This was a wonderful example of how when leaders negotiate, they can actually make deals and make progress. What he has consistently said is that they urge the parties to this agreement to remain within the scope of the JCPOA. We will hear similar things, if I can just look at the tape, because they've now concluded their statements, but you will hear from the SG that this was a bad move from the United States President, and will probably urge him to return to the negotiating table. Let's not ignore the fact also, Griselda, that the President has said that he wants to renegotiate the deal with Iran. Of course, Iran has said that there is a deal on the table and they're not prepared to reopen it.
Well, thank you very much, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, joining us live there from New York on the announcement by President Donald Trump that he's quitting the Iran nuclear deal. Thank you very much for joining us, Sherwin. We'll take a short news break here.